Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. This is your July 25th, 2014 edition. We've been kind of on a hiatus for a little while. My name is William Hayashi, and the reason why is both Jarvis and I have been busy doing other things, and for that, apologies, because I enjoy the show. I enjoy doing it, and even I miss it, even though it does take up Friday nights. It's not like I've got a real big social life or anything, so it's not that much of a burden. Tonight's special guest is Arthur Dawson, and he has his own studio. He's the creator of Doc and AJ Comics. He's an illustrator. Well, I'll let him tell you more about what he does. But if you want to kind of take a look at some of his work, you can go to Doc, D-O-C, and AJ Comics, all one word, Doc and AJ Comics.blogspot.com. And if you want to check out his personal website, it's just www.arthurdawson, ARTHURDAWSON.com. I've been preparing for this interview since Wednesday. I'm telling you, although I just shot my wad about what I know about Arthur. Arthur, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to get you in here.
All right. Well, let's talk turkey.
All right. So first of all, where are you coming to us from tonight?
I'm in my studio. I'm in Orlando, Florida.
How's your weather down there?
We're a little rainy today. I was just checking out the news weather report, and they were saying that very near here, near the city area, a tornado touched down a few hours ago, and
man,
assessing the damage. I don't think there was any fatalities or anything, but but that's what happens in Florida. This is the monsoon season, or the hurricane. That's what they call it in the islands. But here in Florida, it's the hurricane season, and we can expect foul weather in the evenings right up until probably mid to late November, and then it's over. But it's hit and miss.
Well, it's kind of but it's kind of like you get a double whammy. I mean, I'm up here in Chicago in the Midwest, and we have tornadoes don't hit the city anymore, and the reason for that is we've got so much concrete that it absorbs enough heat during the day that we have this huge, really immovable bubble of really hot air. So we don't get the tornadoes, but I mean you get tropical storms, you get stuff that's based over the ocean, plus you can have tornadoes almost any time. So, I mean, even though it's not so frequent, with the weather getting more and more extreme, I would imagine that you're going to see more and more things like, what's happening today. The only times I've been down there, we've had, what is it, afternoon and evening showers kind of in Central Florida that are kind of usual. Yeah.
Afternoon thunderstorms.
Yeah, that's not too bad, and sometimes it does make it cooler, but to my recollection, all it did was it made the air more chewy and hard to breathe because the humidity was so high. So, Well, I hope you're inside and protected. I'm looking forward to this interview. Have you always lived in that area?
No, originally I'm from North Florida, from Tallahassee, Florida, the capital, and I grew up in the area just south of Tallahassee, what we call the Boonies area. That's Wakulla. And Wakulla is an area where a lot of people, even within the state, central, where I am now, Orlando is called Central Florida, and South Florida regions, there's a lot of people that they've heard of Wakulla, but not by necessarily, not by the name. And what I mean is, there's an area called Wauchula, Florida, but it's not Wauchula, it's actually Wakulla. And Wakulla, many people around the globe are familiar with Wakulla. If you think back, depending on how old you are, or if you're able to look back retroly to some of the movies that were out, the old monster movies. Creature from the Black Lagoon was filmed behind my house. It was filmed in Wakulla Springs. In the old black and white, the Tarzan movies that used to come on Saturdays back in the day, they were filmed there at Wakulla Springs. So that's essentially where I grew up. We would go out in the summertime, consisted of swimming in the springs. Who could create the most creative dives? They have a 3-level tower out there, and it's a spring, and it goes into a river, the Wakulla River, which lets out from the coast. But it's a 3-tier tower there, and that was our summers, man. We would go down almost every day and dive off the towers and create our own silly little dives that we would create. We have competitions, and there were other people there too. But it's now a state park, but back then it was free, and everyone in the region, in the area, used to come out and have a great time. So basically, that's where I grew up.
It sounds like kind of, if not idyllic, but still very, very kind of like kid-friendly upbringing. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It was safe. You couldn't get in much trouble.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts you in mind. Now, if you're a nature-loving person, I mean, it's perfect, because there's a whole abundance that a lot of people don't know about, particularly in the South. And in the rural areas, you have a lot of natural fruit trees that grow. You have pear trees, you have peach trees, you have banana trees, you have these what we used to call California plum trees, these large purple plums. And you have the muscadines and all of this kind of stuff. And they kind of resemble a grape. And we would pick a lot of this stuff on the way down, eating lots of fruit. And this was sort of the lunch. And we would get down to the river, and then sometimes we would take down, we would bring a watermelon with us. And you would take the watermelon and just throw it. We would ride our bikes down. That's how we would get there, because it was almost a mile behind where I lived. And it was down this dirt road, and we would go down and take our watermelons down, and then just dump them in the river. When we first get there, we would dump them in the river and start to swim around and just kind of enjoy ourselves. And then after about 25, 35 minutes, the temperature of the water is cold. And it was a way of refrigerating the watermelon. The watermelon would be ice cold and was ready to eat. So, yeah, there was some real fun times, country living. But it was we had some really, really fun times, and we got very creative. And growing up, we were poor. We didn't have much, but what that did was it challenged us. It allowed us to use our imagination in ways that we probably would not had to do if the circumstances were different.
Right. I was going to mention that it under with times like that, and my parents were fairly well off. I would definitely have to admit that I had a middle class upbringing, but times were different. First of all, we didn't have nearly the stimulation that we have now in terms of like electronic devices. No such thing, obviously, as the internet, things like that. And so it did push you to do things. I mean, we exercised more. Like you guys were swimming. We went and, we made up our own baseball teams and things like that, and a lot of things that just don't happen on the spur of the moment now. I mean, obviously we have structured sports all over America. You can't get on YouTube without seeing some crazy parent acting an ass, when they think they're on behalf of their child or whatever they think they're doing.
Right.
And that sort of thing doesn't lend itself to the creativity that we had during our generation. I mean, you're probably a little younger than me. I'm 134. But back when I was around, it was different. I mean, we had a tag game that we played, and we called it Contamination. And and we would use the whole neighborhood, and the game would go for days. If you never got tagged, you had to watch out. Going to school,
right.
Being on the weekend, and people would be chasing you down for sometimes 3 or 4 days. You would never see that sort of thing that happens now. First of all, you couldn't get kids to play tag because they'd be too busy looking at their damn bones trying to see what everybody else was doing.
Right.
So it was an idyllic time to grow up, and a lot of people who are younger than you and I don't have that perspective, and they don't have those experiences. And if I were to be entirely honest, I think that they've missed out on a lot by not doing that, because they don't have the same kind of imaginations. You look at their entertainment, and sometimes you wonder, why is it that you find this so laudable, to take up your time, and you're chasing after this, chasing after that, and there's not much substance. I mean, let's talk a little bit about you. So you're growing up, in the Tallahassee area. I would say we wouldn't even call it suburban. We would almost call it like small town rural, right? In terms
Absolutely.
of flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're doing that, and then let's get kind of dive into who you are. You're an artist. I mean, nobody could dispute that. If you look at what your work is, and for those people who join us later, and didn't pick this up as a podcast, you can just go to arthurdawson.com, ARTHURDAWSON.com, and learn about Arthur's work as an artist. And by the way, do you prefer Arthur or Art?
Everybody calls me Art.
Matter?
Even if I tell them Arthur, they call me Art, and I'm used to Art. It's kind of a we were speaking earlier before we went on the air, and I was asking you about the difference between William and Will. In the South, they tend to shorten your name. If you're Barbara, you become Barb. If you're Arthur, you become Art. And so it's just kind of a Southern traditional thing, and but I play on that because my name shortened is Art, and it just happens to be what I do. And
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, Art is fine.
Yeah, I have felt so stupid. There have been times when I'm walking down the street and someone's hollering, "Hey, Bill, and I'm thinking to myself, why doesn't Bill answer this fool? And then I turn around and it's a friend of mine hollering at me, and then I feel stupid because I just don't hear it as my name. So, I mean, I do understand, and there's no way to really play that off like you. You got it, man. It's perfect for you. About all I can tell people is, whenever I have to do something or in my work, where there's a William, there's a way.
But you know what? You know what, Will? William, the thing is, what I don't get about that, just touching base on this real quick with the name, I don't get how the William, Bob, Robert thing happened. What is it, Dick? Yeah, it's William, Dick, Bob, Robert. And all of those names are exchangeable for someone named William. I don't get how that happened. I can understand.
Dude, I have no idea. I know what you're saying. I have no idea. Oh, the one that messed me up? Margaret and Peggy. How the hell do you get Peggy from Margaret?
From Margaret, right?
Yeah.
I guess some things we'll never know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, okay, so you're growing up in kind of that environment. How early was it when you kind of saw within yourself or kind of were exploring, the whole artistic bent? Was it early in life? Was it later in life? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was early in life, and like I was saying, growing up in the rural environment, your surrounding became food for the imagination.
Okay.
So it wasn't like you didn't have access to the outside. I mean, yes, we traveled and we went to the beach and we would go into, I guess, it sounds a little funny now, but we would go into the city and, to shop and do other things. But for the most part, you spend the majority of your time, at home. And growing up in a rural area, for instance, the wooded area became Sherwood Forest. You look out and from the books and the stories, and then the games were Survivor. We played games like The Hunter, and we would take these. There's a bush that's called DAWSON. It's just basically a weed, and it's like a long stem and on it, and you would cut the bottom off. You would just basically snap it. It's a weed. You snap it, and then you snap the top off. And we would take the bottle caps from the sodas, and you would bend them around the end, and it made an arrow. Okay, and then we would take fallen palmetto limb. It had to be fairly green, and cut both ends, stretch it into a string. So this was a bow and arrow. And we would go out on hunting expeditions. Never killed anything, obviously, but, this is where our mind was. We, perhaps an evening of watching Robin Hood on the television, and now we're going to go out and reenact this thing. And, the wooded area became Sherwood Forest, and we would go out and practice target shooting and shooting at birds and squirrels or whatever little defenseless animals we can find to terrorize. But it was little did I know then we were homing our skills. We were using tactical skills, we were using communication skills, we were using our ability to make our surroundings whatever it is we wanted it to be. Now, there were other aspects of that led into the creative part, which was in North Florida and South Georgia, you have this in certain areas, it's this clay. It's a dark red clay. And if it's not on the surface, you dig down maybe, 8, 10 inches, and you're going to come into this clay. And we would dig up the clay, and you would wet it with water, and you get pretty close to the compound that what you have now that you can buy in stores. Clay, it's just not an oil base. It's more of a water base clay. And we would make our action figures. We couldn't afford action, but we would just make action figures, and nobody showed us how to do it. Nobody told us how. I mean, we knew what the human body looked like. So, it was a little head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and we try to put them in action poses, which was a little hard, it was a little hard because the foundation of creating the character was you go out and you find a fallen branch, just basically stick. And the stick had offshoot branches to it. So basically you pluck it down so that you had a V for 2 legs. You had another semi-V for the 2 arms. And then you would break it up at the top. And you build the clay structure. This was the frame. This was the armature for it. And you
those
put
were
on the
were the skeleton. That was like the skeleton.
Exactly. Absolutely. And you put the clay on, and a lot of times the arms went straight out. Every now and then you will get lucky and you find sort of a weird branch where maybe it curved in. So then you had some punching power because the action figures and was going forward. Otherwise you had to spin them side to side to throw a punch. But this is what we did. Now, we didn't have paint or anything like that to color them, but we got pretty good with creating detail. And we would make these little action figures, and if you leave them out in the sun, these things got rock hard. The only problem with that, you couldn't get them wet because they would soften up. They would begin to sort of melt they would get soft and they would kind of break apart. So once they were hardened, you had to make sure that you kept them, in either in a hot place or a cool, dry place. But you just couldn't get them wet or near water. And we created action figures. And from these action figures, we started creating, using the action figures as models. Sketch. It was my two older brothers and myself. And we started sketching these little characters, these little the action figures, and we gave them names. And we created almost like a little society of action figures, and we began to sketch them and put them in books. And this was my first interaction with, first introduction, I guess I could say, to creating comic books. And we kind of used some of the Saturday morning cartoons. Back then, I think the most prominent character would have been, Batman and Robin and that whole crew.
Sure.
Not just the television show they had with Adam West, but it was also on Saturday they had this Batman and Robin cartoon, and then they had the Justice League. And so we had a little bit to draw from in terms of developing, storylines from what we were actually seeing on television. And we named our characters, and so that's how I was sort of introduced to comics, using sort of the natural surroundings and from where I lived, and that kind of grew.
That's kind of cool that you had a peer-based creative universe. I mean, right around you. I mean, it sounds like everybody around you was kind of into, at least, to some extent or another, into that level of creativity. You start out as sculptors, because you get to the physical play, and then, you translate those skills into going and creating the actual, characters in your drawing. And how old were you, man?
Around 6, 7. Right along.
Damn. Yeah. So, you obviously drew inspiration from the things around you. The television. Probably not so much movies, but I mean, we all watch TV. I mean, we all watch Saturday cartoons. That seems like it was a pretty fertile ground for your imaginations. And then how soon was it, after you kind of converted from the sculpting thing to maybe translating things artistically? How quickly did that happen? Was that a natural progression? Did it happen quickly, or did it pick up later?
It was a natural progression. It happened over a period of probably additional from the age 6. It probably happened progressively over another 6 years. And because this was like a natural thing for me, I never really gave it much thought. It was just you had a thought, you had an idea, you wanted to do something, you wanted to sketch something, or you wanted to make something, and you just did it. And that's about as clear as I can be with that. It was very simple. You saw something on television. Also, wrestling was a big influence. The Dwayne Johnson.
Like TV wrestling? TV wrestling. Yeah,
TV wrestling. You had the Rocky Johnson, and you had the Dusty Rhodes, and the Gorgeous George, and the Andre the Giant, and you had all those guys.
Bobby the Brain. Yeah, Bobby the Brain Heenan. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wrestling kind of translates into, the whole superhero comic universe and on some levels,
right.
They're connected. And so with that influence, I began to draw the human figures. And that allowed me to better understand anatomy. Because a lot of the guys, now, granted, there were few. They weren't like the wrestlers of today. They're not like the John Cena and Dwayne Johnson and Bobby Batista and those guys. I mean, those guys are almost bodybuilders. They're cut. They're very cut.
Right.
Back in the day, the wrestlers they were big, and they were they were big, but they weren't really. They cut. The muscular definition wasn't then what it is today. But there was enough there with some of the wrestlers. Obviously, some were a little more cut than others. But I began to understand anatomy through that vein, and so I was able to shape the characters. And this is probably at about 8 or 9. And now, keep in mind, this was just off and on. It wasn't a daily thing because this was as natural as walking to me. So I was into sports. I was goofing off, going out swimming and, doing other things. And it was just when, was bored, had nothing to do, nowhere to go, then we would sit down and, perhaps I would, draw something. And there was no color to anything that I was doing. Even though, I had access to color crayons, everything was black and white. And that was a natural, that was part of that natural progression for me was with the drawings, because I was using pencils that were more like charcoal pencils. I could get dark, and I could go from that whole gradation, that whole shading sort of spread of going from dark to light. And I was really fascinated with that. And you can get a lot of detail in your drawings. And that's also was a part of my creativity, was actually being detailed with the work. I like realism, to get it as close to looking, as real as possible. And because I had no standard, I had nothing. I was just going from what I felt and what I thought. And so it took a while, but I moved into the illustration aspect, I guess you can call it, of creativity, where I was illustrating just things around me. I was introduced at around the age of 13 to three important, in my mind, artists that allowed me to see the depth of the imagination in art. And one was Norman Rockwell. When I began to see, I was turned on to some of his works that he was doing for the Saturday Evening Post, and it was just, in my mind, it was phenomenal, because the stuff that he was drawing, the stuff that he was creating was small town USA. I can identify with a lot of the stuff that he was actually doing. And I was also introduced, it was close, it was probably close around that time, to Heavy Metal magazine.
Wow.
And and in that there was some pieces. Heavy Metal magazine used to be all about art back in the day. It was, you had some of the best artists, I think, in the world that was in that magazine, and that led me to from there. It was some of the stuff that Boris, I always mess with his last name, I think it was Vallejo, and he's a sci-fi painter. Well, I don't want to put that label on him, but he did a lot of sci-fi and romance book covers. And this guy was awesome. And for so, well, actually Kirby, Jack Kirby / Frank Frazetta. And so looking at what these guys were doing, I made up my mind that I wanted to kind of tailor my art that way, with figurative pieces versus doing stuff that was just expressive thoughts, ideas, where it's more surrealism or abstract, or a part of that contemporary movement that was going on at that time in the late 60s, early 70s. It's, what is it, turn off, turn on, whatever the hippies were saying at that time, but it was, everything got real loose and fluid, and, it was a heavy influence of acid and a few other things going around then as sort of the social drug scene. And it influenced art, it influenced everything, really. And but I decided that realism was the way that I wanted to go, because I was fascinated with the with how you can actually just take an image and sort of bend it to your will, be it
it
anatomy or.
It sounds to me like at that time you weren't even thinking in terms of being of your art being a commercial endeavor. It sounds to me like you were strictly creativity driven, and then you were looking at anatomical realism. You were looking at how do other people execute these kinds of stories this kind of art in a way that looks real. That is, obviously it affected you strongly enough to want to emulate, their drawing realism, their anatomically correct renderings and things like that. When did the part about, well, maybe this is something that I could make money at? I mean, I know you were kind of younger. You were in your teens, right?
Right.
And it sounds like you weren't looking at, artistic endeavor as a revenue stream at that time, but you were looking at, I really want to get good at this because I want it to look as good as this, or I want to, you look at Kirby and his contemporaries and what they produce, and it sounds like you were going, this is a cool thing to emulate because obviously it's physically striking, visually striking.
Right.
When did you translate, or when did you transition into thinking about, well, maybe this is something that money can be made by?
That didn't come actually till later on, because
that's what I figured. It sounded like that.
Yeah, because you have to remember, where I grew up, I wasn't introduced to museums and fine art galleries, or even books with illustrators in them. I just happened upon that one particular magazine. It was in somebody's car that I, kind of bummed a ride with, and it was just a very interesting take on what people can do with their art, because my parents were, at that time, were divorced, and my dad, he was working all the time, and he had no clue to this stuff. So I really didn't have a guide, and I was just floating around. I was like a kid in a candy shop. I knew I had talent, I knew I had ability, but how this whole thing was supposed to work, what I was supposed to do, how was I supposed to use it, I had no clue. So I had the attention span of a 3-year-old. It's like I'm sketching, and then all of a sudden, I'll just drop that and go to maybe sculpture, and then work on that for a little while, and because I saw something that I wanted to create, and just kind of I was really bouncing around with it, and it wasn't until later on that that I figured out. I think it was probably my senior year in high school, and I was being urged, to go on and go to college, but my thoughts were not there. As I said, I was very I had a lot of energy. I was very creative.
Right.
And because I was not only in that, I was on the dance scene. I was in the performing arts as well, with a lot of, at that time, it was a mixed form. I was just a cut up, man. It was a mixed form of dancing where you had the stuff that Michael Jackson was doing, but even more so was a cross between Jeffrey Daniels of Shalimar and Gregory Hines. And I studied a lot of what he did, and I studied the Williams brothers. I mean, those guys who were athletic, and they had these movements, and it was a time during the early, late 70s, it was early 80s, and at that time we're moving into flash dance, and you had the guys out of New York, I think it was called the Break City Crew. I think that was it. I'm not. My mind's a little foggy right now on the name, but they were dancers. They were some of the first dancers that was actually televised or published in a movie. They performed in the movie Flashdance, and so you had this whole pop, rock, hip hop movement being developed in terms of performing arts, and so I kind of gravitated to that for a minute. I really wasn't creating at all, except for I was designing, sort of, if you will, my own little get-up, costume. You know, when you out, we were going to dance and do whatever we were going to do. You know, I was putting together these costumes, and basically that consists of suspenders and, you know, berets and of different colors, and the sort of parachute pants from back in the day, but, you know, maybe bandanas around the waist, but it was just very creative, and I was taking that energy and I was moving in that direction, and that was actually helping me with my artwork, because by coordinating some of this stuff, I was able to go back and actually create better-looking costumes for my characters. And so I understood costuming better in terms of even sculpting and from three-dimensional and two-dimensional forms. And everything was kind of feeding everything that I was doing. And when it was time to go off to college, I didn't I kind of bypassed scholarship opportunities to go into the Army. I'm a veteran. But what I wanted to do was the plan at that time. As far as I had gotten in terms of understanding the art thing and what I wanted to do with it and the monetary aspect of it, I wanted to go to Europe. I knew about the Louvre. I knew about Michelangelo. I knew about Leonardo da Vinci. I knew about Modigliani. I knew about Matisse. I knew about Paul Rubens, Gauguin, and so on. And I wanted to go and see what these. I wanted to go to Europe. I wanted to go to Paris. I wanted to go to France. I wanted to go to Germany. And I didn't have any money, but I knew I could get there through the military. And I enlisted, so I thought, as an illustrator. So and I chose Germany as my first duty station. And man, it was terribly wrong. That's usually, I found out usually the way it goes. I chose Europe. Ended up in Hawaii for 3 years, and it's what we call the Rock, and because that's what it is, man. You're over there, and it's not to diminish. Hawaii is a great thing, a lot of fun things to do, but for a young person with a lot of energy and creativity and wanting to see the world, it was like doing time, man. And because you got things a little late. By the time the music got there, it had sort of played out a little bit in the States. And, so it was I wanted more. And Hawaii is almost like Florida. It's just you see a lot of Asian people. There's a lot more Asian people that were there at the time, and a lot of Asians. Very few, not a whole lot. At least on the island of Oahu, you didn't have a lot. It was kind of rare to meet a full-blooded Hawaiian. Because you had a lot of people from Fiji there, you had the Samoans there, you had the Japanese there, you had a lot of Filipino there. So you didn't really meet a lot of the native people. But, they were there. And I was trying to use that experience to help with some of the cultural stuff.
Okay.
Being able to do. It's a lot of people understand. It's a lot of times when you're doing human figures in artwork, whether it's comic or fine art or illustrations or commercial art, any of those disciplines, you have to know your base is knowing how to create a face and an anatomy of various cultures, because they're not the same. They change.
No, they're not. I mean, a lot of people will go ahead and in order to hone their skills, they will immerse themselves in doing that kind of, almost realistic art and renderings of people outside their culture, so that they could work with the unfamiliar to hone their skills.
Absolutely, and that's very, very necessary, because the result of not doing that, a lot of what you're creating, everybody's going to kind of look alike.
Right.
It's like taking the white Barbie doll. If you say, okay, you want a black doll, it's like just taking a white Barbie doll, spray painting the brown, and voila, now you have a black doll. Well, hold on, not so much. There are certain little features on there that you might want to play with that will make her distinctively, black or African or whatever you're shooting for. And that's all the difference in the world when you're creating, especially when you're doing realism, that all your subjects don't end up looking alike. And you can actually move between male and female, even within that particular culture or race that you're actually showing. So being introduced to all of those various races there helped a lot. I met one famous artist, a guy actually that he was in my platoon, Paul DeBort. And I found out later his father was a famous artist, and he had worked in a gallery in Hawaii. And I got a chance to check out some of his work. So that was my introduction to art as a business. Because prior to that, I had seen some things in the magazine and I had read about some things, but to actually meet someone whose father was actually in a gallery that was being represented by a gallery and his works were selling, then I started to get the idea, or I began to focus on the monetary aspect of creativity and being an artist, and that you can actually make money from this. I knew you could before, but I wasn't focusing on it because I didn't know how it was done. To see something in a book and you can read about galleries, but that's one thing. But I'm an artist, which means kinesthetic learner. I'm hands-on, and I got to go and do it. I learn by doing. And once I got out and started talking with the gallery owners, and they told me a few things, and that was it. I was ready to go. I guess I got what I needed, and they were kind of hounding me there for a little while for reenlistment, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I tried to be all I could be for God and country, man. But it was time to move on to the next chapter.
Well, it sounds very much like you were, for the most part, self-taught in terms of the actual finer, the nuances of being an artist. You know, the fact that you wanted to practice drawing, you know, genetically different people to hone your skills and things like that. I myself, I have noticed that there are differences between men and women when you draw them. So, and that's a really bad joke. But seriously, okay, so you spend your time kind of in, you spend your time in Hawaii. Somebody here wants to know where you were stationed in Europe, though. How long were you in Hawaii before you actually got to move on?
I was there for 3 years.
And then where did you go? And
never made it to Europe. Yeah, never.
Oh,
made
you
it
never
to Europe.
made it to Europe.
Never made
okay.
it to Europe. Yeah, that was the big thing.
Don't feel bad. Seriously, don't feel bad, because remember, Columbus went through the same thing you did.
Right. Yeah. But he got a date named after him. But
yeah, but you know what? You know, we have a funny we have a funny way of how we laud people around here. So you head out to Hawaii. You're there for 3 years. You find out that essentially mainstream, even LA music, gets to Hawaii probably sometimes 5 or 6 months later. And then, you know, because of the culture there, it's not the same. It's just not the same. They you know, when you go to Hawaii, it is very much like, it's not like mainstream or back then it wasn't like mainstream American culture, because remember, the only way that they could pick it up would be by radio. They didn't get television.
Yeah.
You know, there was no such thing as, you know, cable or satellite television that was being beamed to Hawaii. About the best they could get was shortwave, or if somebody came back with a bunch of records. So you're right. It was not like being in mainstream America at all. And did it give you a slight feeling of dislocation or even isolation from our culture?
Yeah. It's what I mentioned earlier. It's like it was almost like doing time. You know, it was beautiful. Women were beautiful. It was a gorgeous place. Weather was nice. I did get a chance to experience the hurricane over there in '81, and I'll tell you why that's kind of important. It's not, you know. And I was over on the Big Island, because you know there's several islands, and the Big Island is actually the island of Hawaii. Hawaii. You know, you got Hawaii, you got the other most popular.
Oahu, you've got all of those, yeah.
Yeah, they go to Oahu, and everybody says Hawaii, but technically, the island of Hawaii is another island. And I was there in '81 when Mount Kilauea, I believe it was. Is that Kilauea? Is that in Oahu? But that's Diamond Head in Hawaii. But it was Mount Kilauea, I believe, erupted.
Right.
And it was something else to see, man. It was. And we were right there at the base of this thing. And we were doing training. And the interesting thing about Hawaii is you have Hilo and Kona. You have two sides to this island. One side, the sand is white. It's beautiful white beaches. The other side, the sand is black. It's really weird looking, but the sand is black. I mean, it's sand, but it's black. And I think it's from all the volcano ash or whatever. But
it's pumice. It's actually pumice. Yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Granulated pumice.
But it's beautiful in its own way. And I was there when that happened, and I'm going to jump forward here for a minute. I'll come back. But why that was so important? It was an important chapter in my life, an important part, is that I realized outside of a monsoon, I have lived through most of the world's disasters. I was in L.A. when that big quake hit back in 2002, 2002, 2004. but the last big one that they had that took out the 405 freeway, I was there. I was in North Hollywood doing the show, and that was a traumatic experience. And I've lived through hurricanes. So outside of volcano, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes.
Typhoons, because you're in the Pacific. Yeah, typhoons, because you're in the Pacific. Yeah.
Typhoon is the only one that I got or tidal wave. That's the only one, and they say you don't live to tell about that one. But that's the last sort of natural disaster that I have to sort of experience. So
Art, did you ever figure that it was you, that these disasters were following you around?
Not so much. No, I never
right,
really.
I'm just asking.
No,
I'm wondering if you were a carrier of disaster.
There's a movie. What was that called? Final Destination, man. No, I don't think I skipped it. But you know what? It could very well be because when I was young, I was around 7 or 8. There was a storm, and my brothers and sisters, everybody kept telling me to get away from the window. And I was just fascinated with the way the trees were bowing, the lightning was striking. And I got struck by lightning. It knocked me across the room, knocked me out of my shoes, actually. And I don't remember much about it, but they still tell me about the experience. So I've had that to happen. Maybe I cheated death at a young age, and then all these other things have been happening around me, like Final Destination. I don't know, but I do believe this that my talents, my creativity was given for a reason, and I have important work to do while I'm here, whatever that is, and for how long that is. You know, I'm gonna enjoy the journey. I'm gonna enjoy the ride. So that being that, that's how I feel about that. Now, I see. Well, wait.
I see being hit by lightning as someone trying to send you a message. I mean, that's just me. And I'll be honest, with the stuff I've been into all of my life, I am surprised that I have not been hit many, many times because it is a way of a higher power getting your attention, isn't it? I mean, were you injured at all over a long period of time, or were you pretty much okay? I mean, when you just say when you're casually on a radio show and go, yeah, that was when I was hit by lightning, and then you go to talk about something else. That's pretty significant, dude, getting hit by lightning.
Well, in my mind, it did at least. I could be more jacked up than I know, but in my mind, I was, I wasn't physically hurt. I wasn't harmed. I was shaken up a little bit, but other than that, there was nothing to worry about. There was nothing to dwell on, and I do believe that there is a high power that's always had its hand on me. I've always been a lucky person. It's actually quite the opposite of what you might think, because when I was 6 months old, I was sent home to die. I was a baby. I had double pneumonia, and back then, it was almost unheard of. They didn't know, at least where we were, there was a great sort of disparity in the treatment of blacks and whites in hospitals in that time, and I was basically, as my dad said, I was just sent home to die. It wasn't anything that they could really do. At 6 months,
you had been written off.
Yeah, having double pneumonia, not just pneumonia, but in both sides. So at 6 months of age, and so I got past that. I got past the lightning strike a few years ago. I got past all these other things. So I like to think I'm a very sort of charmed and lucky person. I end up with this wonderful gift of creativity because, as I said earlier, I also was in the performing arts, and I guess the part of the story that I don't really talk about, but while I was there in Hawaii, I performed against the guys from breakdance. They were there. There was a couple of them that were there, and I performed against them, and I didn't know. It was just some buddies of mine just kind of talked me into it, but I didn't know it was a competition. And I got in and I did my thing, and shortly afterwards they gave me the guy walked up and he gave me this form. He said, well, you need to fill this out. You're the winner for the night. And it was against this guy that's actually, I think they call him Crazy Legs. He was with the group. He was over in Hawaii at the time. He was performing. And I won. And I didn't even know I was really competing. And so what that led to, it was an all-national production. And there were there was 100 Vegas girls there, and these were champions from all over the country who had won their category in the performing arts. It's part of that sort of USO thing that Bob Hope used to do. It's for military people who have gifts and talents, and it's like a national talent show or international talent show. And I won. And so now I'm up on stage doing this thing with New Edition in the background, and I'm performing and doing doing my little dance, doing my thing. Once again, it was just natural to me. And right after I finished, I got approached by this gentleman. He was an older gentleman, and he gave me his card, and he said, well, I'm the manager for Jeffrey Osborne. And he said that you have a future if you wanted to get into the performing as an entertainer, basically is how he put it. And I was like, okay, cool. Then a couple of weeks later, I get this notice that they wanted me. I was one out of the performers selected to perform at the White House for President Reagan at the time. But the issue was I would have had to extend it my last year to stay in Hawaii, and I wasn't going to do that. So I turned it down, and I left Hawaii, and I went to did my last year in Kansas, Fort Riley, Kansas. So I got out of the frying pan and in the fire, man, because that was an experience. I'm here to tell you. Went from beautiful beaches and beautiful women and palm trees and sunny weather to minus 16 degrees below zero, and out in flatlands and tarantulas and sidewinders, and it was an experience because coming from Florida, but that's where I experienced my first white Christmas, and it was snow, and the guys were chasing me. I ran out and jumped into 2 feet of snow trying to make snow angels and snowmen, and it was just I had never seen sleet. I'd never seen cars driving down the road and just all of a sudden someone hits the brakes and the car is just slowly gliding. It just continues and continues. It crashes into another car 50 yards down the road. That kind of stuff was fascinating to me because we didn't get that kind of weather down here in Florida. And so I was absorbing all of these new experiences, and I was taking everything and kind of translating it and putting it into my creativity. And I kind of broke off from the performance stuff, the dance stuff, and just started to focus more on my artwork because I was having people to start pull at me and, to do different things that I didn't really want to do. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about, doing something as a profession. I was just a kid having fun, doing, what came natural to me. And it wasn't until I left the service that I got a little more focused on my artwork. And I left and I stayed with my brother in Jacksonville after I got out, and I remember I went home to Tallahassee, and I was hanging out with my sister that day, and she was working across the street. I think she was working Kmart, I think it was at the time, and the mall was right across the street, the Governor Square Mall, and I went over and I was just hanging out in the mall, and I took my pad and I was sketching the mannequins out of the window. And this lady approached me, and she said, I like what you're doing. I have what was it? It was a son who passed away when he was, I think he was 7. He had drowned, and she had a picture of him, and she said today would have been his 15th birthday. I want to know, can you take this picture of him as a child and show what he would look like today? Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, and I'm like, yeah, I can handle that. And I got the picture. Now, I didn't know at the time that there were eyes on me, and from above, because I was on the bottom level. And I got the picture, and I started sketching and doing the layout. And after I finished the piece, the lady, she went on to shop. And she came back maybe 35 minutes later, and I was just finishing up, and she looked at it, and she was in shock. She was like, "Oh my God, this looks like his brother. This looks a lot like his brother. This is exactly how he would probably look, because this resembles his brother." And she was in tears, and people were starting to gather around, and I was happy that I was able to do a good job. I made some lunch money, and she walked away, and then these 2 women walked up. And she was a dear friend. I haven't heard from her in years. I don't know where she is, if she's still around, but I know she is somewhere out there in the universe. Linda Galena. She came up, and she just finished, I can't remember what the other lady's name was, but they came up and they flashed some badges, and I'm like, whoa, okay. And she said, well, we just came back from Quantico, Virginia, the FBI Academy. Listen, what do you know what you're doing? And I'm like, I'm just sketching. I'm not breaking any laws. And it's like, no. What you're doing is very hard to do. There are very few people who can take a picture and show what this person looks like in an older age without training. And right. I'm like, well, okay. And they're like, would you be interested in doing more of that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And it took a little while, a few months, but I ended up being sponsored by the Attorney General to go to a Forensic Art Academy, and I went to this Forensic Art Academy, and they showed, and that was just basically for the artists to learn the upside, the legal side of forensics. The downside or the other side is more gruesome. That's when you're dealing with the bodies and stuff. But it was the legal side. It's the investigative side. What happens with the drowned body and the burned body and so on and so on. And I graduated at the top of my class, and I went to work for that's what brought me to Central Florida, actually. Lake County, which is the neighboring county to this county, Orange County, and I started out in forensics, and as a forensics investigator, and man, I was making, every week I was in the newspaper for the works that I was doing, and I had what would appear to be a very promising career as a forensic artist, but then I got introduced to the different areas of forensics. It's actually broken down. They don't do it the same now as they used to. Now, if you're a forensic artist, you get most people commonly know forensic artists as police sketch artists. Now, that's one aspect of it, which is sketch art. The other 3 is creating art for trials, which is called demonstrative evidence. Then you get into age progression from decomposed remains, and then you have you have age progression, and then you have facial reconstruction from decomposed remains. So one is aging a person, the other is taking a skull and putting a face on it to show what this person used to look like prior to their demise. Then you have the police sketch artist. Then you have the demonstrative evidence, and that's basically, let's say, take the Kennedy assassination. If you wanted to show how many shooters you had, where they were, what the position had to be based on trajectory and angle and the bullet entry point, then you would do a scale. You would show that and show that this person had to be in this position in order for this bullet to strike and do this amount of damage at this caliber. And so that's where you get all that demonstrative stuff. You do scales, and you may do little line drawing showing entry points and exit points and blood spatter and trajectory and all this kind of stuff. So that's where that comes in to play, and that's useful for courtroom testimonies and accidents, car accidents and stuff like that. So
that's like expert witness kind of stuff. That's the science of the forensics that a lot of people think it's just cut and dried, figures, facts, angles, things like that. But in order to convey that information visually to people, especially jurors, you have to be able to paint a picture that they can not only understand, but one that's accessible to whatever level of expertise and intellect they have. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. For those who tuned in late and don't know what day it is, today is July 25th, 2014. We're talking to Arthur Dawson, who right now in his narrative is talking about, how he got not in the creative bent that he's at now, where you can actually look up his work at www.arthurdawson.com. That's ARTHUR Dawson.com. But some very important work, the forensics. I've done expert testimony in court on a number of occasions in terms of things having to do with the IT industry, maybe examinations of computers, things like that. And even I recognize the value of being able to convey that information visually in a way that juries understand, because that's the job. It's not a matter of whether you're actually proving somebody is right or wrong, guilty, innocent, what have you, but if you can convey to the jury the information that shows or demonstrates what it is you're trying to get them to understand, that's a huge, very important field. And the fact that someone was looking over your shoulder and they said, "Wow, look at this guy. He can extrapolate, from one age and it's not just art. There's a logical progression in terms of anatomy, in terms of getting in facial hairs. Your ears get bigger as you get older. I'm sorry to say, for those of you who have large ears, your ears are going to get bigger. Your feet get bigger. For you to have that level of imagination at age, how old were you?
At that time, I was 20. I was 24, I believe, 23, 24.
Yeah, and you hadn't been to school for that, for anatomy, or at least. I'm sorry.
No, none of it. I didn't have a clue. You
had that native talent. I mean, you made this woman very happy, and obviously you must have been talented because you were able to do a rendering that conveyed the traits, genetic traits that that boy carried. Because if you drew something and it looked like his brother, instinctually you managed to retain the look of the person that, or at least the familial traits of that family. That's pretty cool, man. I mean, to have that naturally at that age, and let's be honest, it sounds like you had very little formal training whatsoever, which is even more remarkable. Go ahead.
No, in actuality, I didn't have any. I never had an art lesson in my life. It was just something that was always there, and how I picked up on certain terms and artistic terms was, even in forensics, the art part, they turned me loose. They didn't, I had that part. I had to go through the training extra, but they just let me do my thing. The main thing was the legal side, but as you said, the science. I was fascinated with the science aspect of what was going to happen, as you mentioned earlier, a few moments ago. that there's certain things that's going to happen to the body. And those are the things that you can't really, okay, I was able to do it two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally. I could sculpt it and I could draw it. But there was no validation. To me, the training was a validation or explained to me what I was doing. I knew certain things had to happen. With the eye orbitals or the eyes and the nose and the lips, the jawbone, what was going to happen with that as a person grows older. But I only knew it from being an observer of people.
Right.
I watched people. I mean, I didn't talk very much as a kid, very much at all. And brothers and sisters used to call my dad and tell him to stop staring at us. I used to just stare. You just watch, look at people. And a lot of people didn't know what, because I wasn't talking. They didn't know why I was doing it. But I was just observing everything about the human anatomy, everything about people, how they moved, bone structure, and how some people look alike, and how some people, even outside of their race. And I'm actually working on a book project with that I'm developing, but it's called The 12 Faces of Man. And basically what I found is that no matter what race, what your ethnicity is, no matter where you're from, there are only 12 possibilities for what you could look like, and there are 12 other people of different races that look just like you.
Okay.
And I've been able to prove that in theory and find various people. I researched that shows an Asian person that looks just like an African American person, who looks just like a German person, who looks just like a French person, who looks just like a Native American person, and so on. And that will spread out to no more than 12 different cultures. And they were all...
Or 12 different archetypes.
Absolutely. Good way of putting it. 12 different archetypes. And they have almost exactly the same nose, the same eyes, the same... It's the same. So what that told me is that people aren't that... There's a small degree of difference between all of us, no matter where you're from, no matter what your makeup is. There's a very small degree of difference. And so going back to what I was saying about how I was just doing these things, I observed a lot of those things, but now I didn't know the definition. I didn't know what a mandible was. I didn't know what a skull suture was and all this stuff, but I knew to shape it a certain way at a certain age. I knew the eyeballs did not grow.
Right, you're born with eyes as big as they're going to get.
Exactly, and I didn't, and they're not going to. I knew that much, but I didn't know why, and I didn't know that it never changes. I just knew that it didn't change as an adult, but as you got older, I wasn't sure, but that was something I didn't have to know at that stage. It was just, I knew as much as I needed to know to apply it to that particular situation, and that's what I was doing. But, going through the school, I learned other aspects. I learned why these things and what this is, and because that's part of the investigative process. You find the skull. How do you determine if this is a male or female? How do you look at that skull and determine if this is a male and female? And I got a lot of assistance by Dr. Bill Daly out of Florida State University Anthropology Department, and Dr. William Naples out of University of Florida, who was at that time the leading forensic anthropologist for our POW-MIA soldiers. They would find them in camps after the war, and they needed to know who these people were, and I think he was doing that at the time. He's one of the leading in the country. Great guys. I learned a lot about them in terms of how to identify age of a bone, and just certain little unique things that only they would know. And I'm eternally grateful to those guys for spending time with me.
Let me sum this up real quick. So essentially, at that point in your life, you already had the skills and you had the intuition. Essentially, you were in school just to learn the nomenclature, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we only have about 45 minutes left. And what I want to do is I want to shift gears, and I want to talk about the things that you're into now, because I really want to. I want people to know, what you've got to offer today, because that's really. Obviously, people want to find out what you're all about, and maybe what shaped you to be who you are. But let's shift gears to like Doc and AJ Comics, because that's a huge part of what you are today.
Okay, absolutely.
This is a company that you started essentially in turn of the century, right, or just before the century turn. You did this in 2000, and what kind of pushed you into what's the origin of Doc and AJ Comics?
Okay, I was actually kind of setting the story up to kind of segue right into that, because it came from the forensic background. I got a call early part of 1998 to do. I was referred to a friend to develop a product for the as part of the, at that time there was a big settlement with the tobacco company, and the states were getting something like $46 billion a piece or something like that. It was a $46 billion settlement. So many states got so much money each year to develop tobacco awareness and educational programs. And this is where the Truth Foundation came out of all of this stuff, and that's where they were born. They were doing this is your brain on drugs, blah, blah, blah. But so they got involved with the whole tobacco awareness. And because the person knew I had a science and forensic background, they thought it would be that I would come up with something very interesting to create relating to this. So I was asked to develop a product. So I said, you know what, I always wanted to do a realistic comic. It was a comic book, and they just all kind of looked at themselves, and they weren't sure, but they gave me the green light. I mean, they understood my ability, and I don't think they were thinking. I think they were thinking of developing some kind of T-shirt or ball cap that says this, that, or the other, but they weren't expecting something on that level. But they gave me a shot, and they said, okay, fine, go for it. And I developed. His name was, he was called the Tobacco Avenger, Brian Bannister. And it was a story about a character a young man who, upon his return from college, found his mother dying. And in this world of the Tobacco Avenger, nobody knew what nicotine was. So the doctors had explained to him that she was dying because she smoked, and he was like, well, so do a lot of other people. He said, well, it causes cancer, and the doctor had worked on a research project with Philip Morris, one of the, well, I can't say that name, but it was it was Acme Tobacco, and I got the sort of a background, or did some research on R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris and the tobacco companies, and I found that they all had scientists, they had doctors that worked for them that did research on tobacco. And so I kind of played off of that, and this doctor, who actually was a client of mine, who was one of the fine art clients of mine, and I try to bring, my clients into my artistic world. It's just sort of a reward of saying, thank you for your support. And Dr. St. James and I brought Carol St. James and her husband Luther, and I brought them into the storyline, and they were my researchers for this for this project in the comic book, and they advised Brian that they've known and done research that there were hazards to this particular chemical, and they began to reveal to him all this information, and he was pissed. He's like, well, why doesn't people know the truth about this? And I'm gonna make these guys tell the truth. So he sets out and he starts to do these things. He finds himself in a bit of a quagmire because he can't do what he needs to do because they know who he is. And he was watching this television show, and he had seen this thing with Amazing Spider-Man. He figured, okay, I need a costume. And he goes and has a costume design. He puts this thing on, and he goes out and he reveals some information, and that's how it all starts. And from that character, the book was a huge success in the state of Florida. And then I added more characters to make it more interesting because I wanted to take the storyline, just the base. That was an educational book. It wasn't a preachy book. It never said don't do this or don't do that. It just had a base or a foundation of tobacco awareness. And
it laid the information out there and let people draw their own conclusions and decide whether or not this was something that they want. Basically, it was an educational piece. Right.
But it had but it was a heavy, but it was turned into an entertainment element. It was made entertaining it was designed to entertain the reader. But there were actual facts there. Like for instance, there was one research that was done where the rats, they took rats and shaved the backs and they brushed on pure nicotine to see what would happen. Well, within a matter of days, they grew these huge cysts and boils on them. So that was the reaction. So in this last issue that I put out, I have these lab rats that hairless rats, and they have these moles and cysts and boils, and they're really mutated and grotesque, and they're large size, and they occupy the base of Acme Tobacco. These are their little science experiments, and when they experiment on these things, they can't let them out, so they kind of gave them the whole under basement area of the building to roam around, and they just kind of open up and throw a carcass or two down there every couple of days for them to feed on and that kind of stuff. And so but you look at these grotesque little creatures, but this actually was spawned from actual research, from things that actually happened based on the research that I had, actual research that had been done. So I took the book and I wanted to take away the educational element from it to some degree because I didn't want it. I wanted it to be a fun book. I wanted it to be entertaining, but I wanted to be able to create something that was as interesting as what Green Lantern was doing, or Batman, and so on. And so I added these other characters and developed a whole team, and they were called the Avengers, the Tobacco Avengers. And eventually, the name is going to change to something else that I'm working on. We'll be releasing soon. That the whole name Tobacco is going to be removed altogether, because that the kids, and adults, teens, and college, they love the book while they're reading it. But then when they look at it, nobody, it still has that educational element, and they want to connect to the fantasy part of it, the entertainment part of it. They don't want to read anything educational in a comic book. You read comics to escape, not necessarily to learn. But these books are unique because I developed them not for the average comic book reader. They're actually for kids and adults that don't normally read comics. So it's done, the artwork is not necessarily done in a typical Marvel or DC style. The characters, a lot of heavy inking, it's actually done in more art form, more of an illustration / art form. So it's more artwork than it is comic art, and that was important because I'm trying to draw them in to the subject matter. I'm trying to draw them into these books and let them see that that there is a message to it, but at the same time you can be entertained, and that this is art as well, because some of these comic book artists, these guys are phenomenal, but they're not necessarily taken serious as for their artwork because it is a comic. It's not, it's not an illustration. It's not.
Well, it doesn't have the same cachet in people's minds, and because of that, people have a tendency to pigeonhole it in a way that may devalue it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so my thing is to show that connection. All things are. It is art. It is an art form, and we should celebrate it as much as we do all the other creative disciplines. And so that was kind of my focus, and I kind of dabble and I go back and forth. Right now I'm working on the 5th edition of the Tobacco Avengers. It's going to tell the story of the villains, because the villains actually use, there's a whole counter team of villains that are being developed by Acme by using this synthetic nicotine, because they know it has mutated the rats, and all the Avengers develops their superpowers. The good guys develop their superpowers from being exposed to when the lab exploded and this, the stuff was in the air and they, consumed it in some way, and they became, sort of super beings. But it was because of their genetic structure. All of them had a similar rare blood type that allowed them to sort of mutate into these superheroes. And so Acme's trying to counteract that by putting together people and experimenting on humans to purposely inject them with this synthetic nicotine in order to build their sort of their protective arsenal of villains to battle against the good guys. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. And then there's a graphic novel that I'm working on called Eric Prey's Demon Slayer, 17-year-old kid who's kind of the world's last hope kind of thing, and he's battling against dark forces, and it's gonna be a pretty exciting book. I've been working on that for a while, and I kind of bounce in between the comic world and the fine art world. Whatever I really need to focus on, and right now I'm trying to focus more on the fine art world, because in the comics, I actually enjoy storytelling. I enjoy the writing a little more than I do the creative part, because the writing, to me, the storytelling, a good script makes the book. And eventually I want to move into animation. I want to, see these characters become animated and tell these wonderful stories. And I think they're now that I've had a voice, I've said some of what I wanted to say creatively. I think that there are other artists out there, young artists that can tell the story, that I'm looking to partner with them, that they can help me tell this story in a way that connects to the comic book genre, the kids who read comics.
Right.
It's time to reach out to them. I think I've developed a product, and I think I know how it's going to be perceived. Done some test marketing, and it's more so about allowing some of those who can tell who can communicate it a little better than I can. You know, I'm still going to be developing, still going to be doing the things that I do, but let's face it, you know, kids speak kids' languages. And so to be able to continue to develop much in the same way that Spielberg and Lucas does. Spielberg has his hands in animation. Lucas still, you know, with the whole Star Wars thing, I mean, it's off the chain. He still has his hands in it, but he doesn't necessarily have to now write the story. You have other young creative writers that can take that with the Knights of the Old Republic and so on, the stuff that they're working on, and just take it to a whole nother level. Still the same vision, but that vision being expanded and actualized in ways that they can only do. And
well, that's true. But I mean, once you get to a certain point, as a successful cultural, I don't want to say icon, but a successful cultural happening, and you become so monetized that it's essentially a money machine, you're going to find out that a lot of creativity gets bled out for two reasons. The first reason is people are terrified that their audience is going to go someplace else. So rather than pushing their own envelope, they stick with what's safe. Okay, they stick with what they know their audience, you know, essentially they stick with their own low-hanging fruit. And the other part is when you have commoditized something to that extent, usually other people have their hands in making decisions about where the creative trail is going to go because, you know, if they buy into something, like if you have stockholders, well, you're beholden to the stockholders themselves rather than to your creative vision because, you know, obviously your job is to monetize everything sufficiently so that everybody makes their profit. Right? When you get to the point where, and I would say that Star Wars is a great example. You look at all the spin-off industries, you look at all the spin-off entertainment, you look at the action figures, the this, the that. Star Wars has gotten to the point where it's very cumbersome, and it has to deliver in a certain way in order to maintain its revenue flow.
Right.
So and to say that makes it very interesting to me to see exactly what kind of plot they pull out for this next movie, you know, the 7th movie, because you know we have seen franchises, both written comics and movies, die of their own weight because they've lost that creative spark that made them what they are.
Right.
I'm certainly not pointing a finger at, you know, your work as to do that. I you know, which leads me to a question. You know,
sure.
Are you the sole responsible person for the content of your creative worlds, of your intellectual property? Because if you are, then obviously you're able to chart the course of it with impunity. Yes. You don't have to answer to anybody. And so in that way, you have to personally balance how you're going to manage something. You know, am I going to go to an offshoot? Am I going to kill off one of my favorite characters because it's necessary to rejuvenate the plot and kind of take people in a different direction? And then, you know, once I do that, you know, you run into the risk of that whole, what was that movie, the Stephen King movie? Misery. Where Kathy Bates goes, you know, she gets upset because Misery gets killed off, and don't nobody want to have happen to their ankles that what happened to James Caan's ankles in that movie. Because the fan is upset. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing. You have a cultural and even a financial stake in maintaining the status quo to a certain extent of your art, or at least the quality. Okay, and you know, at the low end of the scale in terms of maintaining quality to keep their audience, you've got Tyler Perry, and at the high end, you have people who do things like you do, or maybe to a lesser extent me with my novels? Are people going to keep following me because they like the way I write or they like the characters? This is always in the back of my mind, that I have to be mindful of the fact that what I do, though creative, still has to feed an audience in order for me to get fed. So how do you balance that when you look at, when you look at your story arcs? Because like you said, you're the sole responsibility, right, for creativity.
Right.
So how do you balance the needs of the many, and the needs of you in terms of how you're going to manage your creative universe? What's your process for that?
Well, my process is Ropod's theory. I keep it simple. I tell it well. In terms of, it's all about me. This is my little world. This is Arthur Dawson's world, and I get to be King Arthur in it. I get to build up. I get to kill, destroy, break down, uplift, and do what I will. And none of it has to do with the monetary gain. I don't do what I do for the money. It's a simple philosophy of, if you build it, they will come. You just stay true to creativity and what you want to do, or in this case, it's me. I'll just stay true to the things that I want to do in my vision as it comes to me, and the things that are important to me that I want to say, not following any markets, not following any particular demographics and any charts, any marketing scheme, whatsoever. It's what I want to do, and I just do it, and I put it forward, and I stay true to who Arthur Dawson is. I'm not trying to catch up, match up, size up, stand up to what George is doing, or what DC Comics is doing, or what Marvel is doing, or in the fine art world, what Peter Max is doing, or what Jasper Johns did, or so on. I just do my little bit, because those who attract to what I'm doing are attracting for a reason, that they like what I am doing. And as long as they are attracted to what I am doing, and I remain me in all of this that I am doing, then it'll all work out. And it has, and it does. And you're on a creative journey. Creativity dictates what comes next. And as long as I stay connected to the pure energy of creativity, it will guide, and I will go along for the journey. And the financial part will come. Because remember, my introduction to this whole thing was not knowing what was what, not knowing the proper terms, not knowing forensics, but doing forensics, not knowing fine art, but creating fine art, not knowing comic terms, but creating comics. So this is how I came in. And water will seek its own level. All this creativity and prosperity will flow. It will do what it needs to do, because creativity is a living energy, and it's alive, and it's well, and it's well, and it works through the artist. I am just a tool, and there are many things in many of the drawings, sketchings, paintings, the sculptures, and whatever medium I'm working in that happens almost by mistake. I'll have a vision of something that I want to create. It says, okay, this is going to be, I want to do this, maybe an old man sitting down with a tin cup. And that's how it starts. But when it finishes, it's almost always nothing like what I want. There's a man. He's sitting, he's old, he has a tin cup. That's about as close as it gets. But there are a whole bunch of other little discoveries, things that happen. Perhaps now he's on the sidewalk where I envision him sitting in the grass. And on the sidewalk, there are cracks in the sidewalk. And there's little bottle caps and little cigarette butts and little pieces, blades of grass popping up through the cracks, things that add continuity, things that add character, things that speak, little subtle sort of whispering campaigns, if you will, about life. And you have the good and the bad and the ugly, but it's all reality. And you have to see it's all based on the viewer. Some people would see that as a very nostalgic piece. Some people see that as an endearing piece. Some people see that as, wow, that's kind of a dark piece. It looks sad or whatever. And then it all depends on the viewer. And some are going to say, as many people look at the work, you're going to have that many different opinions about what it is that they're actually seeing. And that, to me, that's what I have to stay true to, is just the creativity. Continue to create, continue to produce. The ideas come based on the creative energy, and that is basically you think. And as you open your mind to creativity, the thought will come. You'll know, it's like beginning to write a novel. It'll come.
Yeah, but that's partly true. I mean, if all of us are to be honest, all of us content creators are to be honest, we create for two reasons. Obviously, because we have the bent, we have the itch, we have the what have you, whatever you want to call it. But we also want to make some money at it too. I'll be the first person to say, if my novels and my screenplays could keep me from having to take care of one more 80-year-old person's computer who just effed it up because they don't know jack, I would be the happiest son of a you-know-what in creation. Or if I didn't have to go to one more elementary school where all them kids have all them damn germs to fix a computer lab, dude, I'd be happy. So in terms of feeding our souls and making, some revenue, being able to work off of it, no matter what kind of work you do, no matter what level of story you write, you still have to pay attention to the feedback you get from your readers, right? I mean, let's be honest. And to that extent, what's your level of dialogue? Let me use a great word. What's your level of intercourse with the people who consume your art? Because that's a very, very important thing. There's two things that go along with that. One is obviously revenue. There's popularity that does dictate how you do your work. And the second part is making sure that what you do is laudable enough that it has an audience. So you've been doing this for an awfully long time, man. I mean, a long time. In that period of time, how do you dialogue with your consumers, with your particular consumers? What's your relationship with them?
Well, my relationship with them is pretty much what I said earlier. A lot of, my consumers, my fan base, or those who are following my works, no matter what genre, be it comic or fine art, they follow my work because they get a sense of I have a connection to what I am doing. And
okay, so I get that. Well, let me ask you better. Okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying is, I have a connection to what I'm doing. So I am simply speaking about things they may have thought about, but may not have said anything about. They may not have spoken up about a particular issue or a particular subject, or it's something that they would like to see. We talk about the simplicity of yonder days, of growing up in the country, perhaps. And I get this a lot. A lot of people say, oh, this reminds me of when I'm from New York, but I went to visit my grandparents in Virginia every summer. My parents would send them, and they remember those days of walking down dirt roads barefoot or out at a swimming hole or something like that, and it created happy moments. So within the works that I'm creating, they are living sort of vicariously through my experiences, and they are connecting. We connect on that level because they are relating to what I'm saying. and they like what I'm putting out. They like what I am creating. Even with the comics, they like that the comics are more educational. It's not just blood for blood and gore for gore. It's not street level. If someone is shooting someone or it gets punched, there's a reason for it. It's not just anger or aggression or that it's cool to have a fight.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous. It's not gratuitous.
It's not just gratuitous violence or whatever have you. There's a meaning to it. There's a reason to it. And they gravitate to the things that I create because it has meaning. And usually I find, at least with myself, it's easier for me to stay true to what I'm doing if I'm just following the creativity. And what I mean by that is fine art is my job. The other types of commercial art, those are more hobbies. It's a different when you may be you like to fix things. You're a mechanic, but now you're doing telemarketing sales. You may hate doing telemarketing sales, and so therefore you say, well, the other side has to have the monetary. Well, in my little existence, everything is about art. The forensic art was science, but it was still about art. I was still creating, and my whole focus was still about creating the best product that I could, and everything else was going to work out. I didn't worry about the monetary. I knew it would come if I put forth everything that I had into it and focused on doing a good job and knowing as much as I could know about that particular medium, that everything else would handle itself. So I was able to bounce in between. I did these little statues, these lizards around town. Everybody was like, what are you doing? It's just creativity. That's all it is. But a couple of my friends were laughing, but doing one of those lizards landed me on the cover of Southern Living magazine. I think I'm the first African American that's ever been on the cover of Southern Living magazine. It was the Florida edition that they launched a new magazine for the Florida Southern Living.
Don't flatter yourself. They had a whole bunch of slaves on there in the 1850 April edition. They had them all standing. But no, here let me restate what I said. I understand that you write your stories, and you write your stories based upon a certain inner honesty that you have about your characters and about your story arcs and things like that. What I'm asking you is, is there any way, are you getting feedback about your stories from other people that makes you, and I don't want to say forces you, but makes you consider how your story arcs play out because, you're getting feedback from your audience? I mean, Lord knows I understand the authenticity of putting together a story. There are sometimes when I have readers read my stuff and they say, maybe you could, and if I were to be entirely honest, I hate being entirely honest, but if I were to be entirely honest with my friends and people who say that, by the time they say maybe you would, I'm already not listening. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's like, if you know so damn much, write your own story. But then I pull back. But you see what I'm saying? When you write, obviously you're in your own world because you have an ownership of your characters. You have an ownership of your, I don't want to make it sound cut and dry, but it is your own intellectual property to the extent that you are the final arbiter of everything. But I mean, is there any kind of feedback you get that you do listen to when people say, "Oh man, this was great"? No, none at all. You are so lucky that.
That's what I was saying. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Is that it's all about me. If you want X kind of story, if you want that, then you need to go to him. And if you want this particular thing, you need to go there. And that's what I'm saying. I will get, and that's why I use that analogy from that movie. If you build it, they will come. People who want vegetables will come seeking vegetables. If you got meat, they don't want the meat. They're going to go to a guy who is dealing with meat. Other guy who's dealing with what I do, people come, and my audience has been developed And my clientele has been developed by people who like what I am doing in the way that I do it. And all I have to do is stay true to what I am doing, because the minute I try to change or listen to someone else and change the storyline or change the style of what I'm doing, now who am I? I'm not being true to me, so who am I now? I've now gotten out of my comfort zone to appease someone else, and that's the wrong thing to do, because sooner or later you're listening to this person, you're listening to that person, and you've lost focus on who you are. What are you doing at that point?
Yeah, you have no sense of self at that point. No, and that's what I was asking. I just was asking that for clarification, because there are those people who chase after what they think the next or what the current fad is. I mean, let's be honest. Look at the movies that are coming out today. There's practically no originality in any of them at all.
None.
Because people, studios are risk averse, and they're only going to do what they know, what their low-hanging fruit threshold is.
Right.
And so, it's refreshing to hear that what you've done is, with the niche that you've carved out, you have decided, this is where I live. This is where I sit.
Right.
This is where I write. These are my stories. And this is the way it's going to be. And it's not out of any sense of, maybe it is a little bit of stubbornness, but for the most part is you have a clear vision of where your stories are, where your universe is, and that's where you're going to stay. And that's huge, because not everybody does that. Let's be honest. Yeah. Most content creators are desperate. They're desperate, and they will cling to anything that they possibly can to, if they believe that it will get them one more reader, one more person to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to write this kind of story because it's going to give me my big break, because it's just like X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So for you, that's not relevant. Okay?
No.
That's not in your lexicon. That's not in your wheelhouse. And don't get snippety about it. Don't get all righteous about it. Not everybody has your conviction. It's a beautiful thing that you've got it. Okay? And a lot of people are not as strong-willed either, because when you start out, let's be honest, audience accolades, even reviews, even a little bit of money here and there, all of that provides validation of self to a creative. And sometimes when they don't get those things, and they don't get them immediately, they don't feel validated. They get discouraged, and they go ahead and they flail about trying every possible thing that they think, will work. Like people say, oh, you have to do this. Oh, you have to be on Facebook in order to be this, that, or the other thing, and you have to do this, and you have to. And a lot of people are not secure enough to say, no, that doesn't make sense for me. I'm not going to do that. Okay? So you are one of the rare few who has charted your own course and has been good enough at it that other people have bought into your art and have bought into your intellectual property and have bought into your storyline. So, consider yourself lucky. And I was not in any way trying to suggest that you would do otherwise. I was marveling at the fact, and people should pay attention to the fact that, here's somebody who stuck to his guns, stuck with it for a long time, because let's talk about 2000. The year 2000 is a long-ass time ago. Okay, in the year 2000, this was a different America in the year 2000.
Yeah.
And to have stuck with that for that long, it could be stubbornness, but it could just be that you are determined to stick with what you think is what you're all about. And that's a huge thing. I mean, it's something that you should, other people should look at, and instead of scrambling around trying to find out what the next big thing is and trying to climb on somebody else's, style or someone else's universe, or, let me copy True Blood on TV, or, if I could just write like Game of Thrones, everybody's going to flock to me. Not realizing that's somebody else's intellectual property. That's not you.
Yeah.
There's a desperation there that creatives naturally have, because you don't get much encouragement until you get a certain amount of notoriety. And a lot of people substitute that instead of, sticking to their creative guns. They look for that as validation. And you
Absolutely.
don't do that. You didn't do that. So be happy about it, but don't get so all highfalutin righteous about it.
Hey,
Because,
man,
and here's the other thing. You had natural talent. Think about that. The natural talent that you had is rare. Okay? Look at what you were able to do forensically. Dude, that's huge. That's hugely rare. People don't get that. Yeah, you could draw anatomy, but in your early 20s, you had discovered a way of looking at things that translated into a way that was both artistic, but it was also mechanically pure too, and biologically pure. Not everybody gets that right away. That's a tough thing, man. So you've been very lucky with your talent, and I'm glad that you parlayed it into such a great skill set and a way of expressing it to the public. And when you do get feedback, when you get feedback from people, where do you get your feedback, and what kind of feedback have you gotten so far?
The feedback that I get 99.9% of the time is that they love what I'm doing. Keep doing what you're doing. That's what they always say. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I always took that as a sign of just that.
Right.
Realizing from a marketing standpoint that I'm not trying to get everybody. I'm trying to get mine out of the pot. I'm just trying to get mine. And mine is those who will gravitate to me and what I'm doing, and they like what I'm doing. What I'm doing isn't for everybody, and I understand that. But I understand that there's enough out there that feel like I feel about, art, about life, about, just things in general.
And about the stories you write. I mean, that's huge,
that's
man.
Right.
Think about.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget that. That's huge because that's your wheelhouse. That's what brings them back for more, because they know that Arthur is going to be producing XYZ kind of stories, and since I like XYZ kind of stories, I can always come back here for more.
Right, and my stories will continue to be original and not like what somebody else has done, because I'm not looking for any angles. I'm not looking for any, wow moments in the story. I'm not looking for anything. All I'm doing is simply allowing the creativity to flow, and I try to be the part that I do try to be conscious of is not going, it's very hard, yes, not to say or do something that somebody hasn't done, just unknowingly, because that's just the way creativity works. You can't just do a man with sandals and think you're the first one to draw a man with sandals. But what this man is doing wearing those sandals, you can be a little more original with that. And and so that's kind of my take, is to be as original as possible. And the best way for me to do that is I just stay true to the creative storylines and what's being created, and not allow any outside forces to dictate to me anything other than what I'm doing, because I know where I want to go with it, and I know I'm sure in the creativity that flows through me. So I just allow it, and I trust in that creative energy that when I sit down and I need a few more pages, that it's just a matter of just sitting. Sometimes it's just, maybe listen to some music or just looking out the window, and, you see a kid do something funny to another kid, and then the adult would do something funny to the kid for doing something funny to the other kid, and then you kind of feed off of that. And you say, you know what, that was a real funny little moment there. Well, you take that and put a spin on it. What if? And then you're off and going. You're off and running from that point, and then, and what if this? And what if that? And you're, inside your head, you're coming up with all these ideas and little additions to one little seeded story, and you expand it, and that's pretty much it. And when it's done, you're talking about a moment that expanded out into sort of a short story, and you're okay with it, you identify with it, it makes sense to you, and therefore you know you're not alone in how you think and the way you look at things, so there's going to be a certain degree or a certain number of people that's going to feel the same way, and that is your audience. You know that there's 100,000 people that's going to feel the same way, or 10,000 or whatever, and that's it. You know, you're not doing it because you're not going to get everybody across the board, but you want to just stay true enough that people are getting what. And now, when people look at my work, no matter what medium, and they're not getting it, then that's when I feel that I need to sort of go back to the drawing board and examine what am I doing and why am I not able to convey thoughts and ideas and this creative energy in a way that makes sense to others. But that hasn't happened yet, and I don't feel that it's going to happen as long as I stay true to just the creative energy that just flows. Because right now, my problem is there's not enough hours in a day. I have ideas from 10 years ago, stuff that I want to do, stories that I want to tell, and they're just there. Paintings, right now, I have 172 in my head. Right now, I just finished sketching out a couple of weeks ago, and now I got another 67 that's just sitting in there. I can describe them to you in great detail. Haven't sketched them out or anything, but I know it's there, and they want to come out. They want to live. So as long as I stay true to all of this creative energy, I think I'll be okay. And the people who want what I'm offering are going to follow, and those who do not are not. And I try to keep it, simple.
Well, I mean, and the other thing is, I'm going to give you a hint. I'll give you a tip. When you get to the point where things don't seem to be working, and this is the same in sports, the same in artistic endeavor, it's the same in everything. When you get to the point where things don't seem to be working well, go back to your fundamentals, because they will put you back on track. Look, we're out of time, and I want to thank you, Arthur, for dropping in and spending all this time with us. I mean, you gave people quite the picture, and also you got a fascinating life. One that people can learn from. I hope that the interview was not too onerous on you, and that I didn't talk too much. So,
no,
I
had a ball. I want to talk one last thing though before I leave.
Well, do it quick.
Real quick. My latest product is the Artist Creations Cookbook. It's a fundraising project that I did that I included a lot of artist friends of mine. The book is designed to raise funds for deserving students who are attending college who are art and culinary majors. So that's a project I'm working on with the Tom Joyner Foundation. We're going to be premiering.
Well, you know what? Do a blog post on BSFS about that, and also if you have any appearances that you're going to be doing, in the near future, well, forever actually, also put those on the BSFS, the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com events calendar, because people, when they run into a weekend or something like that, will drop in there to see what might be happening that they could take a look at, and then you could meet some of the people who are listening to this show. As for the bigger picture, everybody keep your ears and eyes out for the latest and greatest about Earth Squadron, which is BlackScienceFictionSociety.com's first of many full feature movies that are going to be produced by the people here. Again, check out your calendar, your events calendar, and for those of you who are content creators, don't be shy about posting up your other work on BSFS so people can take a look at it and check out what you're doing. This has been a little bit of a hiatus for summer. Hopefully everybody is going to be tuning in next week. Remember, this show live is every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. and you get to follow the clock all the way around into every time zone. We even have folks from Kenya who drop in and listen pretty regularly. So you don't, if you decide to leave the country, and I'm not going to, pry and ask what the circumstances were that made you have to flee, you can still check out BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website and the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show. Normally, we've got Jarvis getting ready to hopefully take us out of the show here. I'm looking, and he's not live right now. Don't know what he's doing. He could be getting some of that pizza. There he comes. All right. So on behalf of everybody at BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, I want to thank everybody who tuned in, all of the guests, all of the usual suspects. And go ahead, Jarvis, take it over.
Hey, thanks, Will. You did another fantastic job as always, and I want to thank Arthur for coming on. I've known him for a number of years through the site, and it was enlightening to see firsthand his background and his experience, and the knowledge that he shared with us today was really interesting. I want to invite everybody to come on the site and check out the events calendar. If you know of any events, please post those. And like William said, please share your work with us on the site, in the photos and in the forums, because we want to know what you're doing so we can continue to promote Black science fiction across the board. And with that, I want to, like I said, thank everyone that I didn't mention, people on Facebook, people everywhere that have supported us, and have a good night. I'll catch you over on the chat room probably about 10 minutes after I get some more pizza.
All right. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All righty. Good night, everybody.